Hello, welcome. I think this is one of the first
The first.
The first. Well, then it's appropriate to have Mohsen give the first one because he's such a star. Anyway, I'm Ralph Schroeder. Many of you know me. And to everyone in the room, the first thing I need to remember to say is that we're going to go for about a half an hour or so talk, then about a half an hour discussion. The session is being recorded. Mohsen, I don't need to talk about him very much. He comes from us, comes to us from the US, and he's been with us for a year. And it's been a very happy year, I think. And he's going to talk to us about low quality news. The topic could not be more exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm just going to get out of the way. Mohsen, please.
Thank you so much.
Let's
Thank
welcome
you
him.
so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rolf, for this. So I'm going to share some of the work we have done on, engagement with news across different platforms. This is coming out next week in PNAS, so stay tuned. The working paper is available publicly, so feel free to read that as well. More broadly, two areas of work that I'm currently working on. One is taking this multi-platform approach to study social media ecosystem, which I'm going to talk about one project within that domain, but we have other things coming up in this area where we are leveraging this kind of like multi-platform perspective to study, engagement with various type of content sharing and a spread and so on. And then there is another line of my work, which I'm not going to talk about today, is human AI interaction and having dialogue with human in order to update their beliefs in the context of social media. So we have other papers coming up in that world where we use, AI interventions to update people's beliefs about like misleading content, as well as looking, engagement with systems like Grok on Twitter, for instance. Cool. With that being said, let's focus on this particular piece about, engagement with news across different platforms. If you remember, like 15 years ago, back in 2010, we had very few social media platforms which cover most of the users who were online and using these kind of like platforms. But now, fast forward in 2025, we have large number of platforms that people are using for various purposes, or certain people are using these different platforms. Part of this is because of emergence of alternative social media ecosystems, social media platforms, things like Gap, Getter, True Social, where they have more relaxed content moderation policy and are users who are not often happy with content moderation policy in other platforms select to use those kind of platforms. And then we have emergence of other platforms like TikTok or Instagram who are tailored for some certain content in terms of like images and videos. And then we also have another trend in terms of like the, this kind of like fractionated social media system where we have migration from major platforms, like things that happen to user on Twitter/X after Elon Musk took over because of the various governance and policies for the platform. Many people choose to use distributed platforms like Mastodon and Blue Sky instead. So we are seeing this trend across the board in the social media ecosystem. So the question here is that what it suggests, what are the implications for the studies that we do? Most of the studies on online platforms focus on single platforms like X, Twitter, because previous to Musk, we had the luxury of access to the data using the free API, and some occasional studies on Facebook, for example, using meta content library and so on. So the question here is that platforms have different affordances, they have different information environment, they have different algorithms, content moderation policy, and user population. So when we have some, we find some pattern for one certain platform, it's not easy to say whether that pattern is specific to that platform or it generalizes across all this platform for a variety of other covariates in the equation. So what I'm going to talk about specifically today is that I'm going to talk about the relationship between news source political lean, quality, and engagement that these news that are shared on social media receive. And we wanted to see how those relationships vary across social media ecosystem. For this study, we selected 7 social media platforms. And these are the platforms where we can collect public pieces of content from the users, like regular users who share them. This includes Twitter or X, which we are familiar with, LinkedIn, which is like a professional social media for workplace, Gap, Gather, and Truth Social. These are more kind of like alt-tech platforms, attracting more kind of like right-leaning users. And we also have Blue Sky, which is like relatively new platform, as well as Mastodon, who are leveraging this concept of like distributed social media ecosystem. That is like you can set up a server on your own, and then you can connect it to the universe of the other servers within these ecosystems. For Mastodon, it's called Fediverse. So you can just like, you can have your own server installed in software and then connect it using the ActivityPub protocol to the rest of the ecosystem. In terms of the data collection, so we collected more than 10 million posts across all these platforms that shared in 1 month, that is in January 2024. And these are all the pieces of content that were shared on every of these platforms publicly, which contains a link to the rated news from a list of 11,000 news domains. So we have this list of 11,000 news that were, for which we have the professional fact checkers ratings. We have the political leans of these pieces of these domains, and then we use it as a search term to collect all the posts that create a link that includes a link to one of these domains across all these platforms. And for each piece of content, we collect number of likes, reposts, and views, which is only available on X. So news quality ratings are provided for each of these news domains as aggregated from ratings from professional fact checkers, academic, and journalists. And this is a separate paper on this. Feel free to read that. So they use imputation technique to aggregate the ratings of across all across the board from different ratings. And then for the news quality, for the news political lean, we just use GPT. We asked GPT what's the political lean of this particular news domain, and then we validated using other measures for political lean, like if you're familiar with, like there's a technique in political science like Barbera et al. 2015, where they showed that how we can use the political lean of the elites you follow on Twitter. So we have validated that using well-established methods. And then for engagement, when I'm talking about engagement here, I mean likes plus reshares. But whatever I'm talking about is also robust if we just talk about likes or reshares. Here's the number of posts we have per each platform. This is log transform. So you can see Twitter, for instance, has order of magnitude more posts compared to the other platforms, and all the posts like together have the least. And similar pattern we can see with the number of unique users we have across all these platforms. Another descriptive about this data set. So what we did was that we used the GPT Nano to annotate whether a piece of content that is shared is about the following topics, like sport, economy and business, entertainment and arts, science and technology, medicine and health, and politics. And then, I've sorted here everything based on politics, and you can see like platforms like Truth Social, Gab, and Getter, which are more kind of like alt-tech platform. You see like huge number of posts about politics, whereas compared to LinkedIn, where we expect more content coming, being about like economy and business. And these 3 are also mostly like North American platforms as well. I'm going to show you here the distribution of news quality across these platforms, where I normalize the distribution for each platform to 1, so we can have a better comparison about the volume and contribution of each platform within this distribution. And as you can see, in terms of the volume of the posts, good quality news has way more volume of the platform compared to low quality news. So we have this pick about high quality news. And also, as you can see here, kind of like we have more, right-leaning platform gathered here on the news quality being lower. But I'm going to talk about that more in the next slides. So here's the color shows the political lean of the platforms. Similar plot, but now we are looking at the political lean of the news. So we can see more kind of like volume of left-leaning news being prevalent across all these platforms. Now, what I wanted to show you is the relationship between the political lean and average news quality across all these platforms. So for each platform, we just found the average news quality and average political lean. And then if you look at the relationship of the two, you can see that we found significant and negative association between quality of the news and political lean. That is, on more conservative platforms, there is more probability that we find low quality content, whereas on left-leaning and liberal platforms, we can find more high-quality content. And the association here is just like something like 0.9, 0.92 or something like that. This is, aligned with something that we and other people found in the past that's like also at the individual level. That is, at the individual level, there's also a strong association with the political lean and kind of the quality of the news people share online. So across several studies on Twitter, survey studies like Coda sample from the representative population, as well as on Facebook, people found positive, correlation between low quality news sharing and conservative ideology as well. So this is something that we found at the platform level as well. Breaking down this association at the platform level. So here on the y-axis, I have news quality. On the x-axis, I have news political lean. And the intensity of color here shows the volume of the post for each platform. You can see similar negative association between political lean and news quality. But something that's interesting is that across more right-leaning platform, you can see the sharing of both high quality and low quality right-leaning news, which is not a pattern for left-leaning platforms. So that's pretty much the setup and the descriptive of the data we have. Now we wanted to dig into our main research question, which is how does the engagement relative to news source relates to news source and political lean across all these platforms. So for the analysis approach, what I'm doing to establish the connection between political lean, quality, and engagement, I use separate linear model for each platform, predicting the count of the retweets plus likes, which is the engagement, received by each primary tweet. So we are not including any retweet, just like focusing on the primary tweets, using the political lean of the news. And then here, because the count variable is highly skewed, we just log transform that so we can have a linear have a normal distribution. But I'll show you later that this is robust if you use other specification for the model, including like count models. And then we use the posting user fixed effect here to account for variation across the baseline of the users. That is, we're taking out the effect of single users here. That is, the analysis that we are showing is only driven by the content itself. So we are accounting for the correlation between the user and type of engagement they have. In other words, what we are doing here is that someone might share like lots of right-leaning content, and they also have like many followers. So that boosts their engagement with the content. So we wanted to take out the effect of the user. So here we wanted to see political lean and quality. So because here also like political lean and quality are highly correlated, we run models where we control for political lean as well. So here are different platforms. So I treat different platform as a single study, and then I aggregate the effect in a meta-analysis down here. So looking at the engagement with the content, given the political lean and controlling for the news quality. What I see is that we see a negative effect here for more kind of like left-leaning platform and positive effect for right-leaning platform. That is, on the left, more kind of like left-leaning platforms, we see they engage more with the left-leaning content, and more on the right-leaning platform, we see more engagement with right-leaning content. And what explains this variation? So just looking at this plot, on the x-axis I have average political lean, and on y-axis I have association between the political lean and engagement, and you can see similar pattern here. That is like through social Gab and Getter, which are more right-leaning platforms, there is a higher probability of getting engaged with right-leaning content. And on the left-hand side, more kind of like X, Mastodon, Blue Sky, we can see more engagement with left-leaning content. Something that we call it echo platform. That is, we are familiar with echo chambers, like people with like similar political ideology are more likely to engage with the content, or other users who have similar, political lean, or like getting more engaged with like-minded others at the individual level. But what we are seeing here at the platform level is kind of like an echo platform effect. It's users with similar ideology happen to choose similar platforms and getting engaged with more content that aligns with their ideology as well. But now switching gear to looking at the engagement and news quality, how engagement relates to the news quality. So you guys might be familiar with this famous study at MIT back in 2018 in Science, where they showed that fake news spread wider, faster, and deeper in social networks. And what they mean by social network here is Twitter, because at the time they had like access to Twitter Firehouse, so they collect everything that exists on Twitter, where they look at specific content like were found to be false by professional fact checkers websites like Snopes and PolitiFact and so on. So the question here, we wanted to see if we can find similar pattern across platform, or is it different, because these platforms are very different from one another. Another thing they did was that they focused on specific content or claims from professional fact checkers website. These kind of content are not necessarily representative of every piece of content, because they are questionable enough that were fact checked by the professional fact checkers, particularly in terms of like true news. That is, professional fact checkers might not fact check like every piece of true news. They're like very selective about that. So there are certain things about the study that we wanted to see if still hold in a more general sample. So what we are doing here, one is that we are looking at this effect across wider platforms. Is it true that like engagement pattern or like sharing pattern generalizes into across other platforms or not? And B is that if generalizes across different news domains. So we are using like news domain as a unit of analysis which covers wider news content as well. So, but there are two pieces of evidence here that could be like contradictory at the face value. That is, like, on one hand, we show that higher news quality content shared more on left-leaning platform. If you remember, we show this, negative association. But the other hand, we show that left-leaning content receives more engagement on left-leaning news platform. So is it that we would expect that okay, we can expect that on right-leaning platform where low-quality content is being shared more, maybe they also engage more with the low-quality content. What about left-leaning platforms? Sure.
Can you account for the fact that left-leaning voters tend to be more educated?
Sorry?
Can you account for the educational divide between right and left-leaning voters?
Whether left-leaning people are more educated, can you account for that?
I mean, that's difficult because we don't have that that covariate, because these are the users. Otherwise, we need to estimate that from their profiles, which is like very noisy. So one interesting thing that we can do is linking that to the survey data, which we didn't do here, but that's another possibility. If we have the link, like we run a survey, we collect all those demographic variables from the survey, and then ask for their Twitter handle, like social media handles. That makes things a lot easier. But here we don't have that, unfortunately, because we don't have visibility at the individual level. But for the survey experiment at the individual level that we did in the past, we found robust effect. So that's controlling for various demographic factors. You can see still, this difference. Question, what's the underlying mechanism? Which could be information environment, for example. We are exposed more to like low quality content than you're, sharing more kind of content, or there's certain things about the value system of people from one side of the political spectrum versus the other. That one needs really like teasing apart, and then we wanted to have like more robust individual measures, characteristics, and then the sharing behavior. It's like interesting research question, but we cannot easily tap into that using the observational data. So question here is that, does high quality content receive more engagement on the left-leaning platform then? On the right-leaning platform, we can expect that, low quality content might receive more engagement because more low quality content there, and also like they're more likely to engage with right-leaning content as well. But what about left-leaning platform? Is that the case that high quality content receive more engagement on left-leaning platforms? Similar analysis like we saw before, but in this case, we are predicting the engagement using news quality, controlling for political lean. Each study is basically one platform, and then we are aggregating over across all platforms. First thing, not surprisingly, we found we found evidence supporting along with the previous study. That's on Twitter, if you, instead of like using fact check claims, we use the quality of the news domain shared on this platform, you will see still people are more likely to engage with with low quality content. And if you control for the political lean, still that's the case. What about right-leaning platforms like through social Gab and Getter? We see that as well. That is like on all these right-leaning platforms, people engage more with low quality content. What about the left-leaning platforms? Left-leaning platforms, on average, people share more high quality content and more left-leaning content as well. But interestingly, we found that's the case also for left-leaning platforms. For platforms like LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and Mastodon, still people proportionally share more low-quality content compared to high-quality content, even when you control for the political lean of the news domain as well. And this is the aggregated effect. So like negative association between the news quality and sharing across all these platforms. How much more engagement? So quantifying this effect is around 6% comparing the high quality versus low quality in terms of engagement. And here we have similar pattern where we are just looking at the top 10 high engagement content across these platforms. Is it driven by a particular news domain? That's not the case. There's an aggregated effect. And you can see proportionally high quality news websites like USA Today, Reuters, New York Times, Washington Post, and so on, Wall Street Journal, even though they are high quality, they receive proportionally less engagement. That is, if I share a post from this high quality website versus a low quality website, these websites proportionally receive less engagement. We've done a variety of different robustness checks for these results. So instead of, transforming the count variables, we also use count models like negative binomial regression. Similar pattern exists. We exclude non-English posts, just focus on English posts. The effect is there. We control for whether the website is paywalled or not. That is, one, covariate could be here, just like, paying for the, like income variable here. So still, that's the case. Or like many of these high quality websites might be like paywall, but if you control for that, the effect is there. We run models, separately for reshares or retweets versus likes. And it's still, we find similar patterns in like very similar, like, highly correlation between reshares and likes. We didn't include comments here because some of the platforms, they have like different affordances for comments. And also you really need to see like a positive comments, negative comments, and so on. So we didn't dig into that. And then we ran similar analysis where we use the views, which is only available on Twitter or X, where we use views as the dependent variable here, and we found similar effect. That is, like low quality content receives more views proportionally on X, but the effect is way smaller compared to the actual engagements. We also included analysis using posts from 8,000 Telegram channels. So across all these channels, we also found similar effect. That is, low quality content across all these channels on Telegram receive more engagement as well. Here we control for the channel as the fixed effect. So in conclusion, we developed this multi-platform approach that provides important insight into the information ecosystem. That is, here, instead of like matching users across platforms, you're matching content across platforms, and we can look at how the engagement pattern is different from one platform to another, given the political lean and quality of the news. Users on platforms were more users on platforms where more right-leaning news are shared, also shared low quality news. So this is the negative association between news quality and conservatism ideology. But on the other hand, we found that news sources that are aligned with the dominant political lean on a given platform receive more engagement on that platform. In other words, is this effect of echo platform. That's like in each platform, people are more likely to engage with the content that is widely available on that platform. And to our surprise, across all these platforms, we found a robust effect that users are proportionally more likely to engage with low quality content versus high quality content. But remind you on the fact that still in terms of the volume of the high quality content is way more than low quality content or low quality news across all these platforms. But what we are looking here is the proportional sharing. That is, if I'm exposed to the same content from the right and left, from low versus high quality, I'm more likely to get engaged with low quality content. And there are like studies looking into that. For example, the Science 2018 paper, one of their hypotheses is that low quality content or fake news by definition is more creative and more novel, and that's why people are more likely to engage with those kind of content. So, like I mentioned, the paper is coming out next week, but feel free to read the preprint that's already available. And with that being said, open up the floor for the questions. Thank you so much.
Who's got questions?
go all the way to the back.
I mean, did you have ideas? Thank you. Have you looked into underlying algorithms and whether platforms can push low quality content because they're going to have engagement, creating a vicious cycle?
Yeah, I mean, at least at the platform level, we can definitely say that it's not only the case, or even could be the other way around. That is, platforms like Mastodon, they don't have any, algorithmic sorting for the content. They still see that effect there. So it's like purely chronological, very like boring like mechanism to show the content to the users. So, and then on the other hand, at least on X, what we found was that the effect size for the views is way smaller, order of magnitude smaller than engagement. So it could be something that the algorithm pushing the other way around is just pushing like low quality content down. So still we can say it could be something about the user's engagement. But what we need to do like similar different design to tap further into that at the user side. But at the platform side, I think the combination of different platforms with different news, information environment algorithms and user population, it shows that it's nothing specific about the platform driving that.
I was just curious if there are any hypotheses that you had going into it that were like disconfirmed or anything you found surprising about the results.
I mean, the thing that I showed that I really was expecting that left-leaning platforms, people are more likely to engage with higher quality content because, on left-leaning platform, people engage more with left-leaning content, and left-leaning content on average seems to be higher quality, but you see the other way around. That's like even control for all of those things that pops out. That's like people are still prefer to get engaged with lower quality content, even with left-leaning platforms. Think about like LinkedIn or Blue Sky. Still, we will see that effect there, which is pretty surprising.
Monitoring online questions as well?
No question yet.
No, nothing yet. Okay, great. Yeah. So
you showed the different platforms have different rates of different types of news, like sports or politics. Were you able to, or would you want to in the future look at the different rates of sharing of disinformation across different types?
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely that's interesting. Something that can combine with that is that we are building this scalable classifier so everything that I showed is just like domain level. But one thing that we are doing is we are building this scalable classifier to classify content as at the content level. So that one interesting thing we can potentially do is just rate all this content in terms of like being fake or not, and then break it down by the topic. That would be super cool.
or low quality and high quality.
So the thing is that if you break it down just for low quality, high quality, there's a big confounder if you break it down by the topic. But something that we can do is just because if you break it down by the quality would be like, some domains that happen to share lots of sports, they also happen, and they were like rated as low quality. That could like high compounding factor here. But it would be nice if we do the classification at the content level and then break it down across the topics. And that's like the very basic thing is just also like looking at the engagement across those topics. It's like, is it like, okay, people share more like new, I don't know, entertainment on LinkedIn, but is it the case that it also receives more engagement because the volume doesn't necessarily relate to engagement? So I think that's super cool thing to do. And we can do that with the data set that we have. Sure.
Thank you. I'm interested in the exclusion and inclusion criteria for the platform that you have chosen. Facebook was not part of it, and thinking Google News is kind of like a source of information with algorithmically kind of suggested content based on the news. Is there a reason why those are not part of the data set?
Yeah, I mean, Google News, I didn't know about it. I don't know to what extent we can treat it as a platform, like a social media platform. But the big challenge here was ability to access the data. Facebook and all the meta platforms like Instagram, Threads, you can get access through MCL, but I don't know if you have worked with MCL. A, you can only access to public group and channels and public figures, so you don't have access to individuals. And B, is completely not useful. That is, like, you work with things in a, just a clean room environment. You cannot copy and paste. You cannot run your own algorithm. So we were pretty much limited if we wanted to do anything on any meta platform, basically. But we are expanding. So far, we have, like, I guess, like up to 20 different platforms in our infrastructure for the future studies that we have in the pipeline. So this includes like lots of other fringe social media platforms and messaging apps like Telegram, WhatsApp, and like basically public groups. But yeah, it would be nice, but there's a major limitation in terms of the data access.
Sharing this brilliant research that's really
Thank you.
very, very interesting results. I was wondering, so there was a relation between strong correlation between political leanings and quality of the content shared. And I remember that you shared color maps that shows that, but for each specific platform. And I didn't have enough time to look at it, but I got an impression that this relation is different within the specific platform. So I got an impression that on left-leaning platforms, right-leaning content is of lower quality than on right-leaning platforms where it's very diverse. Is
Yeah.
this the case?
Let's see if I can find that figure. This one?
Yeah, yeah. So if we take a look at right-leaning content in this type, for example, it's all low.
Or low quality. Whereas
And later,
right-leaning platforms, you can see lots of high quality
yeah.
right-leaning content
So
as well.
it seems it probably contributes to polarization because if you're on a left-leaning platform, it is aligned with your beliefs. The right-leaning content that you see is of low quality and it contributes to this negative impression, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and another question is very methodological. So you mentioned that you analyzed something from 8,000 Telegram channels. May I ask how you chose those channels?
So there is a data set of 120,000 Telegram channels already available. So like a paper, I can share the paper with you, and we cited that paper. So what we used was just we randomly selected, I think 10,000 of those were at least they share one link to our news domains. And then we scraped or used the API to collect the data just for January 2024.
I'll remember next.
Yeah, sure. So the good thing about that data set is all the posts are also available, so you can leverage that as well. Sure.
I want to ask the question, what you think the feasibility would be for a study like this, looking at like subdomains, like for example, age, and how that might drive or affect the engagement on subdomains, because I know there have been other surveys and studies done that show that like it's younger people who tend to get the majority of their news from social media. So I wonder if getting age in this data set might help contextualize it. Okay, maybe older people are engaging with this lower quality news because older people tend to be right-leaning, but then maybe they only get 10% of their news overall from social media. So maybe it's not as big of an impact as we think, or vice versa. So I don't know if you think that's methodologically feasible, because I know there aren't any like, identifying factors in this data set.
Yeah, that's a cool question. I mean, like Andy Guest, Princeton, he has a paper on Science Advances about age and news quality. But that's a great point about the usage. There are algorithms, at least well developed for X, that you can use to estimate people age and gender. And then you can combine it with their pictures, for example. I have a paper that we show that even if you use people usernames and provide it to like search enabled LLMs, they can do a reasonable job in terms of inferring people political, in terms of people demographic factors, which is crazy. Like, you know, just like the username and the model is able to both like collect the data and estimate people demographic factors. So you can use such models for inference of people demographic factors, but with the caveat that you need to validate them and you make sure that the model doesn't have a bias that can affect your downstream analysis. That's like if the model is not doing a good job for certain, you know, demographics, it shouldn't be like affecting your or introducing some bias in the analysis that you do. So that's one version, and another version, just like what I talked about earlier, just like if you can run a survey where you know get the ethical approval to also link it to their activity online. The downside of that approach is that it's a high selection, because usually you wouldn't be able to get like many people from like alt-tech platform to do your survey. Whereas if you have like a model to, or like even combining both, like inferring people characteristics as well as like running a survey. So have a more robust approach to see like who is using the platform, what they're using it for, and what kind of content they consume or share. That's a great idea.
Thank you for the sharing. Very interesting. I have two questions. First of all, I want to ask the inclusion of LinkedIn platform, because for the subjective encounters of LinkedIn, mostly there are like news related to professional settings instead of like politically related content. So how do you categorize the political lean in this LinkedIn platform? And secondly, if we apply this research into a different context with the different political regimes, for example, what are the caveats that you think that we should consider? For example, like countries like China, or like countries like other countries without the political compass, either like neither like left or right, for example.
Sure. I mean, a couple of things here for LinkedIn. We really wanted to include LinkedIn because it was interesting and it was completely different from the other platforms. So that would be nice to see like that's the case. In terms of like estimating political ideology on LinkedIn, we just use our list of domains. So this is based on the domain they shared. I mean, similar additional approach could be done when if you have like a classifier at the content level instead of like news, and then you can estimate the news, sorry, the content, like excluding the domain. So then you can do that using LLMs, just classify the content in right and left. That's another way of doing that. But for us, just limited to 1 month of data of sharing certain domains from right versus left. And for the other, context, as far as you can establish a measure for political lean as well as quality of the content, I guess you can recover much of the methodologies here as well. I know, like, for example, some of the countries, they have like 4 different political parties, but they are also still the same axis. There's like extreme right, right, central, left, extreme left. So you can to some extent map that into other, and it could be like you treat that as a categorical variable if you have different parties. So you can break it down by the parties and then compare it across the parties. So the thing is that you wanted to create, if you wanted to do it at the domain level, you wanted to create a well-established list of domains with the ratings and then take it from there.
If whoever hasn't had one yet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really interesting. I was just wondering also in terms of the word engagement that we use, and I wonder when people are sharing it, is there a difference in terms of how the purpose of sharing the content? So for example, would you hypothesize that a left-wing platform, people might share the comments more critically than a left-wing platform?
So sorry, for clarification, you mean like instead of like sharing, they would comment on it, or?
Why you share?
So for example, if
That's
somebody shares content on a left-leaning platform, could they be critical of that content as opposed to other things that are shared?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, even to see that if the intention to share is different from one platform to another. I guess some part of that, and we cannot definitely say anything about that unless we just like either run a survey to ask people, but some part of that could be interesting if you look at the comments. We didn't collect comments for this paper, but you can imagine you can collect the comments and then use the comment sentiments to see like to unquote, at least on X we have quotes. I don't know about the other platforms. So you can quotes and comments to see just like what's like when someone's sharing it. Is it like, with negative commentary or positive commentary? I know many people say, retweet is not endorsement, but most of the case it is. but yeah, I think that's a good point. We really don't know. But most of the cases, I think it is in terms of like, if you do not agree with something, you would definitely make a comment and share it, or like quote and comment. So I really don't I don't disagree. I do not agree with this thing, and then you share it. Whereas if you just retweet it, but yeah, but I think we can definitely dig into that.
I think, by the way, we have hundreds of topics here for potential master's theses. Many details.
We could use the same data set. I have a question around, I'm trying to wrap my head around who is the actor within this information ecosystem is driving the conversation. So on one hand, you have the users, which is resharing low quality news, right? Or you have the production side, which is the news sources, which is producing all this maybe clickbaity news that is more high engagement. And then there's the algorithm side where all these platforms have different algorithms that tailor to different advertisers. Based on this research, what do you think who has the driving seat in this ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess at least like I mentioned earlier, there's like, because we see this effect on platform without, algorithmic feed like Mastodon, we can somehow think about that it's not necessarily the algorithm. And they're like work, for example, with Facebook, where they try to downrank like low quality content and so on. At least there was some effort in that world. But definitely we can think about low quality content being more clickbaity, and that drives what people get engaged with. Because when you are, low quality content, particularly fake content, is by definition fabricated, and you want it to be as innovative, as interesting as you want, as you can, and then you don't have any limitation. Whereas, like with true news, is not the case. So that's something inherent about the low quality content production, and there's like a whole world of studies about how people basically fund that, which is exactly that way. So there is a paper in Nature by people at Stanford, and they like look at the basically revenues for all these clickbaity websites, because they sell ads through that mechanism. And you will be surprised that like majority of these low quality fake news websites are indirectly funded by those who are buying ads. So that's the whole world of this ecosystem. So you wouldn't be surprised that such content would be more engaging with the users, because that's kind of like by the definition of their business model.
I had another question about if there's differences in like the flagging of content on these platforms, like either top-down mechanisms of like LinkedIn, when you put up a post and they think there's misinformation in it, there's something from LinkedIn, or a community notes based thing. I don't know enough about these particular platforms to know what the flagging mechanisms are, but A, do you know about the differences across these platforms in that? And B, do you think there would be room to like look at the effect or lack of effect of these on how people share things?
And that's a good point. Many of these right-leaning platforms, basically, they don't have any mechanism. So like GapGetter, these are like super dark platforms, like, and you might have seen the reports here and there about like content, like not only low quality content, like illegal content. Sure. So, but thinking about the difference in the effect, I guess we wanted that's a bit challenging at doing at the content level, but would be more interesting if you can match users across platforms. We have another data set that we match people across large number of platforms, and we know that these are the same exact users. So we are doing like something basic there, which is like the same people, what they share in one platform versus another. So that we are doing some of that. But also it would be interesting, like the same person sharing on one platform, like what the engagement is different, or what the platforms do to their content. That's one thing, I guess would be interesting. And another thing that I've also thought about is on the intervention side. It is like if you do interventions, like you really need to have a randomized interventions to make sure that like what's driving the effect, so you can compare. So you can do it like the intervention across two platforms and then compare the effect. But definitely, I can see we will see a substantial difference across the platforms. Thank you.
Exactly.
On the like technical modeling side, I'm seeing on the slide, remember you had fixed effect per poster,
Yeah.
right? To control for posters with like a lot of followers potentially. Was that like an additive fixed effect? Like I'm just thinking, was that like trying to in like the regression model, so like a single variable for additive for each poster, or was that like multiplicative, like so that the does that make sense? Or
So the way fixed effect works is just basically you're considering one intercept for each user.
yeah,
So the intercept is different for each users. So that the so basically you include a dummy variable you have for the users. And then that absorbs the difference between the baseline of the users. So you have 1,000 followers, I have 10 followers. So you receive way more engagement. But if I include across all the posts you shared, whereas for me is less. But if you consider like a different intercept for you versus mine, so we can compare everything on a similar ground. So accounting for all, not only the number of followers, but all the characteristics that might be correlated with the user. That is, no, there could be a bot with 10,000 followers, but none of their followers are engaging. Whereas like another, user might have 10,000 followers, but all of them are more engaging. So there's like a difference between the two. Or in other words, you can think about somehow meaning, like reducing the mean of each user in terms of engagement and then comparing across the board.
yeah. I guess my question was that this like uses like the same baseline per poster, but you would still expect, like for example, a poster with many followers to have higher variance across the different posts that they're making, right? I was like curious about whether you thought about that in that like as a modeling decision, because like the results might be determined by a smaller set of posters who have a lot of followers and therefore like still produce most of the variance in the resulting data.
Yeah. That's a good comment on the modeling side, which is very difficult to disentangle because there is this correlation between the users and the type of content they're sharing as well. So what we can say from modeling approach is that if the same users share this content versus the other content, like low quality versus high quality, the low quality content receive more engagement. That's we can say, but it's very difficult to see like how much of that is driven by users who have more variance versus less. Because if you do not consider the fixed effect model, you just like run a simple regression models, you wouldn't, it could be problematic because you have way more like, Washington Post with like millions of followers and they share like high quality content. The effect would be completely different. But the point you mentioned is one of the limitations of what we did. That is like, it's driven toward more of the users who have higher variance in their content. But this is difficult. I don't know what else we can do to account for that. But because there's a high correlation between the users. Otherwise, we could definitely run another model just looking at the content without fixed effect, but that has this fundamental issue because like all the high quality content providers also have like many followers. But that's a great point. I mean, if you thought about any alternative specification, let me know, but yeah.
I was, quick question because I know we're like out of time, but I was wondering if while you guys were like want to like qualifying like where the posts were leaning like conservative or liberal or right and left, like if you guys found specific topics that were reoccurring, like were most of the content like related to abortion or like other like topics right now, like where they're doing that?
We didn't do analysis like that, but I think the data is there. We can easily like do that to see like what type of content people from right versus left share. I mean, another interesting analysis would be like whether they would use different narratives or different framing about the same content, which is like another interesting thing. Something that is, exactly. Something that's of my interest for the future is just like you see the same. I mean, even you can do that across platforms. There's like both platforms talking about the same event, but how they're talking about it. And that would be like what are the different narratives they're talking about.
Final question.
Okay, so I was thinking about the practicality of studies of this size. They briefly talk about like the time, money, and resources for these companies' data.
Yeah, I mean, for the data will be, we got the ethical approval, but it involves quite a bit of, engineering to see like how we can collect the data. But once the infrastructure is there, you can do a lot of things with that. So you need to do a bit of engineering, particularly for the platforms that do not have the API readily available. Blue Sky is easy. Mastodon somehow, but like Gap might not be very easy to collect the data from. So that's a bit of engineering. And then there's like, definitely you need to pay for LLMs to annotate the data for you. That's like another factor in terms of like money if you're considering that. And then the rest is analysis, and then you wanted to try different analysis to see which one makes sense and so on. But majority of these studies, you can start with a small subset and then see how you can, let's say you can start with a platform for which you have the data, and then you can expand from that, rather than like going with like a large number of platforms and then you don't find the effect that you're looking for. So, and then it's just, even for our study, it's just limited. It's like 1 month of data, and it's definitely someone wanted to see like if it generalizes over time. But that's how we could like afford it. But you can like look at longer time scale, particularly if you are talking about fragmented social media ecosystem. Would be interesting to see during the time to what extent polarization at the platform level happens. Like, are the platform more polarized than before or less polarized? I think that would be an interesting question that we cannot answer easily with the data we have. Thank you.
Excellent. Let's thank Mohsen again.
Thank you so much.